Happy Tuesday, March 10th, right? Yeah, March 10th. Wow. It's moving right along into March. We're almost halfway through March, fastly approaching the fun tax looming deadline of March 15th for those that own businesses. So get ready for taxes. So yeah, sorry for that. Good wake up call and a reminder of that. My bad. Not really the greatest way to start a stream, is it? Thank you guys for being here. I do appreciate it greatly. Thank you for joining me once again for another Advantage Daily Brief. Today, it won't be brief. It will be right at an hour. I've got a few articles we're going to go through. Some good things coming. I'm going to have to jump straight into it because I actually have 5 we're going to go break down today, but they're not going to be, I think a couple of them are going to be pretty quick, kind of piggybacking off of what we talked about yesterday. So just what's coming up in the show is I'm going to be talking about the new first showing is online article talking about basically your first showing for listings is going to be happening more and more online through video, 3D tours, video, photos, all those type of things. So we're going to talk about that. Then I'm going to be going into a conversation in regards to clear collaboration in action, what the Compass-Redfin deal gets right, and also NAR's response to kind of what Compass is kind of doing and Redfin and what their position is, which is kind of enlightening. And I think an overall kind of a good response from NAR in regards to all that. Then I'm going to go back to a conversation we kind of had yesterday talking about mortgage rates and how certain things happen in our economy that causes rates to fluctuate back and forth. We'll talk about that. And then we'll end with an article talking about should buyers tap retirement savings for down payments and assistance like that to help bridge the gap to affordability. So we're going to dissect all that. But first of all, before I even get into the actual show and the content, just for random conversation stuff, has anyone watched Free Solo, the movie Free Solo, where the guy climbs without any ropes or anything? I think it was El Capitan mountain. Let me know in the comments if you have seen that, and if not, if you can handle it, go and watch it. It's a fascinating experience emotionally, and just you're just like, how can this guy climb this mountain? This solid rock granite that without any ropes or anything, and just the fear of that. It's just amazing to watch that. At the same time, you just sit back and go, like, this guy is absolutely crazy, right? That's the experience you kind of get through the whole movie. Well, and just recently, he actually scaled a skyscraper, and we began watching that last night. We've not gone all the way through the whole thing, and he did this live. So they have like a newscaster all set up, and they're analyzing, commentating on his whole entire experience climbing this big skyscraper. His wife's there. There's people inside the skyscraper looking through the windows, taking pictures of him. And you just look at this guy, and he is, you can't help but like watch and be like, this guy is absolutely bonkers and out of his mind. And you can't help but also worry that probably one day he'll die doing what he loves, right? That is kind of the idea you get behind this as watching this guy. You pray that doesn't happen, obviously, but at the same time, it's just like the risk is just so high. But he is like so committed to doing this. And you watch him scale a skyscraper, and every movement he makes is one of strategic placement. Every single finger and movement. And with being a skyscraper, you have repeatable positions, right? You're going from one window to the next and scaling up, and you're one thing after another. So it's the same movement over and over and over again. Now there are certain segments to this skyscraper where you have to change the movements, you have to adapt to the environment and keep climbing up. But he has orchestrated this. You got this world of just complete chaos, and you think, wow, this fear is there, and what he's got to overcome mentally and physically and everything like that. And then he's in his zone, and you got all these distractions of these people watching, and it's filmed live, and all this kind of stuff's going on, but yet he is moving through all of that noise and navigating this skyscraper while climbing up and without any ropes or anything, no parachute, nothing. I mean, just if the guy was to fall, he would die, and that's his position. As crazy as that is, and I would absolutely never do that, you can't help but understand kind of correlating that in just to real life scenarios. We as agents are part of this industry that is constantly changing. There's things being thrown at us from every direction. And there's a lot of fear and worry and things we've got to overcome as real estate agents to keep kind of trekking on. And there's a lot of confusion that can even enter into our market. But one of the things I just encourage my agents to do, and you guys as well, is that be forever a student. Be forever a student of the industry. And if you notice when you watch this guy climb this mountain or this skyscraper, you know he was a student of the challenges that he had to overcome. He never really backed down because of the fear of it. He faced that obstacle each and every single time, and he studied that skyscraper. They analyzed the weather. They checked all the data. They just began to understand everything he could possibly do about that skyscraper. Every scenario that could go bad or go good or whatever it might be, he analyzed everything that he was doing on that skyscraper. And now we might not ever, and I pray you never do what this guy does free soloing. It's wild. But at the same time, there are life lessons to be taken. So what I would encourage you to do, go watch the show, go watch the movie. I think it's called Skyscraper. I think it's on Netflix. Go watch it if you can stomach it, knowing that he survives. I mean, no, sorry for the ruining of the story there, but to be honest, I'd rather know that and watch it than not know that and be on my edge of my seat. They actually filmed this live, which is even crazier. But I say all that to say, like, become a student of your skyscraper, right? Your industry. Like, don't ever just rest on your laurels and think that you have it all figured out. We are in an industry that's constantly shifting and maneuvering, and we have to be able to do things that make us uncomfortable. We can't just settle in. We have to be diligent and intentional with knowing what's going on. So I was watching that. My mind was going through that, thinking about today's live show, thinking like, man, how can I be like this guy, not climb a skyscraper, but as far as facing fears and things that worry me and keep me from doing things I need to do to go forward and grow my business and that kind of stuff. What am I limiting myself to do just because I lack the knowledge to be able to navigate that? So I need to be throwing myself there and learning everything I can. So hopefully that's what I'm helping you guys do here as well as we do this. And for those just joining me, what I do here is I go through real estate news. This is specifically kind of tailored towards real estate agents. Now, consumers can watch this and gain some stuff out of that. I actually get a lot of comments and DMs from people that are just consumers asking me questions about buying and selling, those type of things. I also get a lot of questions from realtors and their questions. So this is aimed at you guys as real estate agents. And I go through media and news in regards to the real estate industry. And I kind of begin to kind of cut through a lot of the noise and find opportunity inside of that for you guys to then kind of maybe create some action items behind that. So that's what I do. So today is no different. I live stream Monday through Thursday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, right where you're watching this. All the news articles and links that I talk about in this live stream are found in the show notes of the YouTube channel in the description. So you guys can go check those out there and read them for yourselves, which I encourage you guys to do. I don't have affiliates. I don't do any of that. This is literally just me talking through some news articles that I find online. And this is my daily practice that I do just to kind of keep myself informed. And I thought, why not do this as a whole and bring other people into my conversations that I have internally. So that's what I'm doing here. So with all that being said, we set the stage. Let's go ahead and begin today's live stream and this show. So here we go. Welcome to the Real Estate Brief. I'm Adam, and today we're cutting through the noise. We're going to get to the truth in the news, look at the data, and I'm going to give you some of my observations and where I believe you can find opportunity. So if you're ready to gain your real estate edge, let's dive into our very first story. And today we're going to begin with an article from RIS Media, R-I-S Media. And the title of this is "The New First Showing is Online," and the subheadline is "Examining the Impact of Home Staging on Buyer Behavior and Sale Price in the Digital Real Estate Market." Now, what's happening in this article is RIS Media is highlighting a massive shift in consumer behavior, where the digital experience that a consumer might have isn't just a preview of the property more. You got to begin to think of this initial digital showing as the first showing. All right. So it's not that technology is replacing the actual showing, but the truth is this is where the buyer is going to get hooked. And they're looking for multiple ways to engage with that property that leads them to go and look at the property in person. And as agents ramp up and start doing more and more technology, it becomes more and more important to create an entire digital package for every single listing that you have. And that's what we're looking at today. So we're going to be talking about this article, breaking down what those type of things are, And we're going to be talking, you got to think through the digital presence of your listings, right? We've got video, we've got photo, we've got live tours, we got intro, outros of where you might be talking. You have 3D walkthrough tours like Matterport. So you got this whole digital kit now that we didn't have 5-10 years ago that is now becoming more of a standard way of marketing properties online. So that's what this article is going to be talking about, and it's going to be highlighting virtual staging, that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get into this very first article. And like I said, this is by RIS Media. Just know I'm not affiliated with this, but if you want to have access to RIS Media's news articles as well as Inman News, which are real estate agent specific news organizations, they do come with a fee, so you have to pay for that. I do think it's a good investment. It keeps you informed. They have categories for different things: agents, brokers, teams, marketing, coaching, technology, all those type of things. You can find a lot of information on there. And even though it comes at expense, not necessarily the cheapest, I think there's a lot of information on there to keep you and help you stay on point. So just as a little plug there, I think they're helpful in that regard. All right. So what are we talking about? All right, so let's go into this one first. It says, above, a listing photo of a room staged by Alexandria Pearl. Homes are not purchased with logic alone. They are purchased with emotion. Thoughtful staging creates the emotional connection that allows buyers to envision their life unfolding within a space. I often refer to it as the Disney effect for homes. It's about creating an intentional experience designed to inspire, not simply a display of square footage. Now, if we pause for just a second as we read that little text there, think through when you are doing photos or video. It's not just about showing that space. It's not like I'm just capturing a photo to say, well, that's the living room and that's the kitchen. What you're trying to do when you're tailoring your marketing for digital presence is, just like they said, you're creating that emotional connection to that property. You're trying to help the buyer envision what it's like to live in that environment. And so you're bridging the gaps between the two. And that's where, like, kind of the way you film a room and the way you structure a photo and the way you virtually stage it ultimately matter. You're trying to get the buyer to understand what it would be like to live in this house with themselves or their family. So that's what you're trying to get around in the marketing here. And that's where thoughtful staging, it's not just about throwing some furniture in there. Look, I understand there's a lot of AI out there that can do virtual staging. I get it. I have seen that go really bad. It's probably going to get better as time goes by. But if there's not thought behind it, and it's just a matter of me getting some furniture inside of that room and not really thinking through what it might be like to live there, then I'm missing the ball. And AI just can't add that human element just yet. It's getting a little bit better, but it makes a lot of mistakes. So if you do use AI, take your time to look at each one of those photos and make sure that's looking correct, right? And we'll get into some of the liability too and legalities as far as virtual staging goes, because there is an issue there too. This person, I forgot to say who this is. This is commentary by Alexandria Pearl. All right, she says, I stage 98% of my listings because the presentation directly impacts perceived value. When a home feels elevated, cohesive, and intentional, buyers subconsciously associate it with quality and desirability. That perception translates into stronger offers. Now, there's a lot of statements inside of that, right? I mean, if you think about it, it directly impacts perceived value. There's a perception that comes along with a property that is digitally displayed correctly. Like there's something that makes me say, wow, I could see myself living there. I feel like I could connect with that home. And that is an intentional subconscious behavior in a buyer. Now, what we need to be careful though is not to manipulate. These are sales tactics for sure, but we got to make sure that we provide the value back correctly and not just manipulate a buyer into visualizing what it might be like to live in that home, but not the true reality of that property, right? I mean, if you think about that, if I was to go in and virtual stage that property with the highest end stuff and everything looks just perfect, and then I negate the nuances of what's actually going on inside of that home, like maybe where the kitchen's positioned or the way the doors might flow, and I'm not portraying the home correctly. Or if you use AI and it removes a door and puts something else there in its place. We've seen this happen. I've seen staircases be put where there shouldn't be. I've seen sinks placed in living rooms and it, just glitches. So you can massively distort the image. And that's another thing too, is you got to be careful of, is if the AI or virtual staging removes anything that is pertinent to the actual structure of the home and it hides that, that's another liability issue. We got to be very transparent and not hide defects and problems with homes and editing photos so good that it's deceptive. And so there's a balancing act here. We're trying to show the emotional connection of a property to the virtual staged photo and the home, but not distort the facts of the home. So it's a balancing act. It says most buyers struggle to visualize potential in a vacant property. Empty rooms can feel sterile and disproportionate. In owner-occupied homes, personal decor, dated furnishings, clutter, or even scent can create distractions that dilute emotional impact. Meanwhile, resale properties compete directly with impeccably staged new construction models. So if you think about this as a whole, right, you've got, I would say this is very true. A majority of people go into, let's just say, a living room with multiple doors. They struggle to see how to set up that space. So that would be where I would say thoughtful AI staging is crucial. That's where it's the most beneficial. Like knowing where to put a couch and a love seat and a chair and TV and that kind of stuff in a space is showing the usability of that space and not distorting that space. And I think that's the balancing act here. And we do understand that empty rooms can feel sterile. They can feel disproportionate. They can be kind of hard to kind of relate to. So that's the virtual staging side of it. Then she kind of went on to talk about like occupied homes. And we talked about personal decor and, dated furnishings, that kind of stuff. Now, again, be careful just removing a bunch of information from that photo. Because when someone goes into that house, you want to make sure that it's not like, wait, what just happened here, right? Like, why is there none of the furniture I saw online? You don't want to be deceptive. You do want to help them. So if a room is cluttered, yeah, stripping away some of the clutter and removing those objects could be a good thing. A lot of MLSs also have rules against dogs and photos of family and people and that kind of stuff cannot be visible. So those are avenues where you need to make sure you remove that content from those photos. So another thing you need to do, right? All right, let's continue on. The first showing happens online. So this is the point of my, to be honest, where I'm leaning the heaviest on is what is the digital showing in 2026? What is it shaping up to look like? All right, so it says today, the first showing is almost always digital. Buyers discover homes on Zillow, Redfin, and brokerage platforms long before stepping inside. According to the National Association of Realtors 2024 Home Buyers and Sellers Report, 97% of buyers began their search online, and photography is the primary factor in determining whether they pursue a property. This is the end of the era where you can just go in and take your phone and just snap a bunch of photos and then just upload them and call it a day. There is a standard of elevation here that's taken place. And it's no different like if back in the day when websites were getting going and you had to like maximize your site engine optimization, right? Your SEO. You had to go into your website and critique every little word and every little structure and the metadata and all this kind of stuff in hopes that your website would then get pushed to the top by Google and get found. Nowadays, that's almost dead, to be honest. AI has actually hurt it even more. That's a whole other topic. But the same thing is happening online because if you just think about it this way, if you have a page full of listings, you're now competing for the eyes. You're now competing for the eyes of the buyer that's looking at those listings. If you look at a whole swath of properties on one page, the one looks pretty, the one that's got a good structure to the photo and balanced and framed in right is more likely going to get clicked. Then the one that actually gets clicked on and begins to interact with, you'll notice they'll linger on those listing portals longer if they have the 3D, the virtual tours, maybe some commentary by the agent and multiple photos. They have the twilight photos. They have the edited slightly with green grass and blue skies, and all those little tweaks holds people's attention greater to that listing. So you have a much higher chance of converting that lead, that looker into a lead, right? So we have to digitize and understand that the way we structure our properties to go online is our first showing. That's the first showing. That's how they're going to interact with the property the first time. That's going to lead to a showing. And if your property is not meeting those standards, it's more than likely getting pushed down the line just a little bit. All right. It says, in many instances, clients send me listings they have discovered online before we even discuss scheduling tours. If the photos do not make an immediate impact, the home may never make it onto their must-see list. Research suggests buyers form a first impression within 7 to 10 seconds of viewing a listing photos. In reality, it is often even faster. In today's scroll-driven environment, we are competing for 2 to 5 seconds of attention. That means the first 1 to 3 photos must be exceptional. I mean, you got to understand that when these websites, like if you use Zillow or Redfin as these portals, they are analyzing every little click, every single interaction with that photo, and they're constantly trying to rearrange the listing pages. And that's why they're always changing. Like if you go to Zillow right now and you went last month, it probably looks a little bit different because things change so fast. They're watching the data and the metrics to see how people interact with certain listings, and they're tweaking that. We as agents got to do our best job putting our best foot forward to make sure we get it presented in the way that gets the most click through. So it is a game. It is a game that we have to play to get the most eyes on our property so we can better represent our sellers. So just listing a property and taking some photos and throwing it on the MLS and then letting the aggregate go is not enough. You've got to structure that property correctly to get as many eyes on it. Think about what they just said. I mean, it said 7 to 10 seconds, but then she said it's even faster. So let's just say let's just average it out. Say it's 5 seconds. You have 5 seconds to get the attention of somebody to click on that listing. So let's just do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. That's the short window of time that you have to capture somebody to click and interact with your property listing. That's not very much time. So you can understand that they're going to see photos first. That's probably going to stop them from scrolling. They're going to read a little bit of the description and what the details are, maybe the bedrooms, bath, square feet, maybe location, that kind of stuff. And then they're going to click. All right. Then it goes into like, well, how long do they stay on that property? What is on that site to keep them there, to help them get the first digital showing to lead to the physical showing? This is the process. This is that sales funnel, right? All right. Yes, as if a property appears dark, cluttered, or poorly composed online, buyers arrive skeptical and prepared to negotiate aggressively. If it presents as bright, intentional, and aspirational, they enter emotionally receptive and more inclined to justify value. By the time buyers walk through the door, a narrative has already formed in their minds. It's already formed. So see how that's like the very first impression, right? Staging for the camera, not just the walkthrough. As discovery has shifted online, staging has evolved. It is no longer solely about how a home feels in person. It is equally about how it translates through a lens. Live staging remains the most powerful strategy, but it now requires a nuanced understanding of photography. Camera angles, lighting, scale, contrast, and spatial flow, neutral palettes, balanced proportions, layered lighting, and subtle texture photograph beautifully. Simplicity and cohesion create visual calm, and visual calm performs exceptionally well online. You know, this is where a professional photographer comes in. A true photographer, not just somebody who started up a photography business and is just doing some, maybe they did great portrait shots, they're really good at, they understand camera settings, all those type of things. And that's a good photographer. But that does not mean that photographer is good at real estate. A good real estate photographer is going to know the angles, the nuances of the property, understand how to position that property to get eyes and hook them. They are students of real estate, not students of photography. They are students of real estate. So what I would encourage you to do is find a photographer that is real estate focused, that understands real estate. That's the best photographer because they're going to capture these nuances, right? That's the one that you want to hire. That's the one you're looking for. All right, the financial impact of presentation. Poor presentation costs sellers tangible dollars. Limited visual appeal leads to fewer showings. Fewer showings typically result in extended days on market. Extended days on market often necessitate price reductions and increased carrying costs. In other words, you incur more cost. Instead of positioning a home at the top of the comparable range, poor presentation can push it toward the bottom. According to NAR, member surveys and industry performance metrics, homes staged prior to listing spend 73% less time on the market compared to similar non-staged properties. That time advantage translates into leverage, negotiating strength, and stronger net proceeds. All right. And then she makes a statement. In short, presentation influences power. We can't negate this. This is not going anywhere. Technology is just ramping up more and more and more, and it's getting harder and harder to compete. You've got to do certain things to get your properties positioned to get the most eyes on it. So if you are a data junkie, go in and look at your data conversion. Is your properties getting clicks? Most brokerages and most MLSs and associations have ways to track your syndication and give you reports on click-through and that kind of stuff. I would look, and if you've done some professional photography on one property and you didn't do it on another one, look at the data and see where it correlates. And do a test yourself. It says, in today's market, stage is not a cosmetic luxury. It's a strategic marketing investment. The new first showing is online. The scroll is immediate. Attention is limited. Buyers are making emotional judgments within seconds. So that's the makeup we find ourselves in. We can't escape this. And yes, it comes at a cost. You know, as real estate agents, and especially if you're new, getting into this industry and getting listings can be a very expensive endeavor. But it's one that if you can spend the money up front and build that value proposition to your seller, leads to more listings. It's a little bit of this window because there are still a lot of agents out there that do not hire professional photographers to come in and do their work. And it might be that you're really good at photography and you do it yourself. That's fine too. But the reality is you got to do all these things. But there's opportunity there because you've got agents that are not doing this. So if you have the pocket and you can fork out some money to build a listing package to help sell more properties, then that's a good thing. You've got a little bit of an opportunity here because there's still a lot of agents that are not doing this. But I do think this is going to become more and more the standard because sellers are going to start demanding this more and more and more. All right. So to summarize this, and I kind of summarized it this whole time, what we need to understand is that high resolution media, virtual tours are now non-negotiable floor level requirements for listings. That's kind of where we're at. Now, it doesn't mean every single property falls into that category. There's nuances. There's certain times when it doesn't really make sense to do high-end professionals. Like if you're doing something that's been gutted and it's a flip and it's just a mess, you can probably get by without that one if it's priced well, that kind of stuff. Land, commercial, there's some nuances there. I still lean towards having professional photography at least, but as far as residential goes, it's a non-negotiable item now at this point. It's like the floor level. It's like if you're going to get listings, you're going to be a listing agent. That's where you land, right? And we just going by the data alone, data shows that the buyers are narrowing their must-see lists significantly based on digital assets alone. We just read through the data. So to summarize that, they're making decisions based on the digital presence of that property. So we gotta understand that and put that into our minds and be like, look, if I want to sell your property, I've got to do these things, right? So that's kind of where I would land as far as summarizing this type of stuff. So agents that typically would just not optimize their online experience and focus on their listings, they're probably going to lose the lead and probably not get as many listings as they could. So here's some action items I would just say as taken away from this. I would work inside of your listing presentations your digital first marketing plan. Talk and break down. If you use a professional photographer, ask them to give you some material on describing what all they do, right? If they do walkthroughs, if they do virtual tours, intro, outros, if they do drones, if they do photo, video, reels, all the 3D Matterport, all that kind of stuff, draft that up and make that maybe a slide or multiple slides in your listing presentation that says digital first showings leads to more showings, right? And then under your digital first showing slide, you put in your marketing plan that your photographer has given you. What a great benefit that would be, right? That would capture more listings, I would think, because I don't know how many listing agents are actually putting that into their marketing that way. I think maybe they're saying we do professional photography and maybe just leaving it there. I don't know if they're really emphasizing and explaining the importance of that as far as being a first showing that leads to more showings. I think that's a good point to lean into when you're doing a listing presentation. I think it's a differentiator to some degree. I would say, as far as vendors and who you work with, if you're working with a photographer, talk to them this week, get more details about what they do and how they do it. Look at all their options that they have. If you don't have one, interview some photographers, get out there and research them and see what they offer and how much it costs and weigh that cost per, pros and cons, and look at that and see if they offer what you need. Like, go through their whole list and then look at their list and say, which of these items am I not doing that I could start doing to create my digital showing better and differentiate myself between the other agents out there that might be doing something similar, but not all the way, right? So just kind of look at that. The last thing I would say, though, is if you are using a photographer, there's an opportunity here to film maybe a behind the scene video or photo shoot type thing where your photographer, if they'll let you, let them sign off on this, but wouldn't it be cool to like do part of your YouTube or TikTok or whatever video strategy is follow your photographer around as they do the photo shoots, the drones, the video, the 3D Matterport, and just do multiple clips that you can use to create a virtual digital, listing presentation for others to log on and see. I think that'd be kind of cool, right? So anyway, there's some food for thought. All right. With all that being said, I took way long on that one, but I think it's kind of an important conversation. I'm going to kind of burn through some of these other articles because I've got to wrap up in about 30 minutes. So bear with me, guys. Number 2 that we're going to talk about, and this, I'm going to try to get through this kind of quick. It's kind of a heavy topic right now because it's being talked about everywhere we go. And that is in regards to clear collaboration in action, the Compass-Redfin deal. So if you're not familiar with this, I'll just summarize this. Inman is, and this is by Inman, it's an article by them. This is an agreement that Compass made with Redfin regarding off-market listings. And basically what happens is Redfin or Compass has a kind of a system that basically says, if you keep your property off market, we'll market it inside of our Compass websites, and people can see it that way through internal networking and that kind of stuff. For sellers that decide to not put it on the market. Now, this can be a contentious arguments on both sides. I'm not going to get too much in the weeds here. You can go back and watch some other live streams, but there's arguments to be had on both sides. One side says, like Zillow's side, and they'll say, look, we need the data because it's important for everybody to know what's going on with that property. It helps the buyers, helps the consumers. And really the best thing for the seller is that it goes out everywhere, so that way they have the best chance of selling their property. Compass's argument and a lot of other brokerages' argument is seller choice. It really just comes down to that. We want to be able to go in and talk to our sellers and give them as many options as possible and help them navigate through that and discuss benefits, pros, and cons of both. Now, I would say, that there's, on Compass's side, there's an argument to be had there where they're talking about giving the ability for a seller that maybe wants to stay more private, but yet still put out as many eyes as possible on the property without being forced to put it on the MLS and syndicate everywhere. So maybe more limited amount of exposure and giving that as an option to a seller. And that's kind of where we're landing at. And this is where this is kind of shaking up. So I'm going to read this article, and then I'm going to talk about what NAR, the National Association of Realtors, has said kind of in response to the Compass and Redfin deal. Now, they didn't directly respond to Compass and Redfin just because they don't weigh into what other brokerages do. And that's a good move by NAR because that could get them into trouble, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. And in this headline too, this is clear collaboration in action, what the Compass-Redfin deal gets right. And the subheading is, the deal is a move toward a more flexible, consumer-centric model. All right, so this is, and we'll just put into the whole understanding here, is this is an article that is considered an opinion piece. So this is some research, but it's based on someone's opinion. So, but it's worth us having this discussion because it could affect all of us in long-term situations. This article was written by, Jason Haber, and he is an associate broker at Compass in New York and co-founder of the American Real Estate Association. So to note, this is where we got to make a note here. This is somebody that is associated with Compass, giving an opinion about this. Now, you might disagree with Compass altogether. You might say, I think what Compass is doing is great. Just know that we're reading an article that is an opinion piece. All right. Here's where it begins. It says, when the American Real Estate Association introduced our clear collaboration proposal last year, we weren't just proposing a policy tweak. We were starting a national conversation about breaking from the dogmas and legacy systems that have long constrained our industry. The response told us we hit a nerve. 30,000 agents have now joined ARA, and the debate over seller choice versus platform control has moved from the margins to the mainstream. Now comes the Compass-Redfin partnership, a deal that champions the very principles we've been advocating. Expanded seller choice on where, when, and how their home is listed, while sharing that information with real estate professionals rather than keeping it siloed. So there's a lot to kind of say inside of this, but they did strike a nerve. There was an amount of control that was going on by the portals out there, Zillow, Redfin, and even Realtor.com even, and sometimes NAR, they've actually relaxed a lot on the rules and their policies as far as what brokers do, and we'll get to that. But that's the thing, is like they did strike a nerve. And we're talking about consumer choice and seller choice here. And does a portal or an association have the right to dictate how brokerages operate and confine them into operating with the way they say that needs to be done? So you got to understand that the basic foundation of this entire position is a little bit of a pushback against another entity saying, we are going to force you to do the way we want you to do it. Okay, so that's the foundation of this. Now, when you start getting into the weeds of this, there's all kind of nuances as far as like pros and cons, but that's the foundation. That's the pushback. It's like, wait, we're our own independent brokerage. We are ourselves, right? Compass is like, look, who are you to say that we have to do certain things your way, right? And that's where the pushback kind of came from. So that's the foundation of this whole entire thing. All right, two shifts are happening here. So this is the point where we just got to focus. The reaction to the deal has been predictable. Enthusiasm from some, outrage from others. One industry veteran called it war. But what most of the commentary missed were two fundamental shifts happening beneath the surface. All right, so let's just listen to this opinion piece. First, this deal reaffirms that agents have fiduciary responsibilities to our sellers, not the MLS or portals. So we'll rest there for just a second. As real estate agents in every single state across the nation, you have a fiduciary responsibility. And that fiduciary responsibility, who does that belong to? Who do you owe that fiduciary to? Your clients. And in this argument, your sellers. You do not owe it to your MLSs or your portals. So the argument is to deprive your fiduciary responsibility to your seller from being able to look at all options just because an MLS or portal says you can't, is not, this is their argument, not the fiduciary responsibility that you should be giving to your seller. You should be proposing all options to them. Everything that is legally and permitted should be presented to the seller and strategically talked about with them and helping them to navigate what makes sense. Okay? It says sellers want more choices, not fewer. They want control over their own transaction, not a one-size-fits-all pipeline dictated by others. The Compass-Redfin partnership is a vote for seller choice over platform control. If this deal was so bad for sellers, why haven't sellers risen up to object? The simple fact is they haven't. Instead, the objections have been cloistered to those whose control over the industry is at risk. Second, the Compass-Redfin relationship accelerates a vital transformation in how we determine the right price for a home. Okay. So if you think about pricing a home, you would go out and you pull data. You would then use that data to then assign a price to it. You would then have to go live everywhere with that property. You were forced to, once you had a listing contract signed, you had X amount of time to get on the MLS and everywhere else, and it would syndicate everywhere, and that was the day, right? It would just go out, and then you had to wait for the consumer's opinion to come back and tell you needed a reduction. And that's the way you actually began to price things well. Typically, you would list a property, and if the market shifted in the amount of time you had the listing, you would then have to shift that property back to a different reasonable price. So the argument here that Compass even makes is this gives you the ability to keep it off market for however long that might be, depending on your local MLS rules and regulations, and gives you time to test the pricing before it goes mainstream. It gives you the ability to get your own agents in there, looking at the property, critiquing the property, and adjusting price accordingly, making corrections, maybe some repairs or some decluttering, all those type of things before it's ready for the masses. So that's the argument. For decades, price discovery in real estate has been a purely quantitative exercise. We pull comparable sales, analyze days on market, study absorption rates, and make educated guesses about where the market sits today. Then we launch a listing price we hope is right and wait to see what happens. I mean, that's exactly what I just said, right? It's like you just throw it out there, oh, let's just hope it works. If we got it wrong, the damage is done. And this is true. And again, take your mind off of data access to buyers. Take your mind off of that. What we're talking about is the damage, the data where we priced a home a certain way is now out there forever. And does that help your seller? So again, the argument is who do you owe fiduciary responsibility to? And it's a seller. If you're a listing agent, you owe it to the seller. So by doing the data and getting the price wrong and not being adjusted correctly to the market hurts the seller. So this is the argument. The Compass-Redfin partnership enables price discovery to become both a quantitative and qualitative exercise before formally going to market. Sellers can gauge real buyer interest and reaction to pricing in real time, not theoretical interest based on comps from 3 months ago. And that gets even worse if you go into rural areas. If you go into rural areas, like I live in a rural area, to pull comps is difficult. There's a lot of homes that you just can't find comps for, and you're just like, well, it might sell for $500,000, and you just throw it out there and hope something happens. All right. Think about how other companies or how other industries approach product launches. Tech companies don't release a new product at full price without beta testing. True. Streaming services soft launch content in select markets before going wide. Also true. Fashion brands preview collections to gauge demand before committing to production volumes. True. These industries understand that real-world feedback is more valuable than internal projections. Why should real estate be different? This is the argument. Under the current system, a seller who launches a $700,000 house receives feedback that the market values the home at $550,000 and adjusts accordingly, is penalized. That price reduction lives on the listing forever, signaling to every subsequent buyer that something must be wrong. Isn't this a fair argument? Like when you get down to it, it's like, yeah, this is kind of an argument to be had. Because it does affect because if we go back to what we were just talking about, the emotional position of a buyer, right? Think about that. If they look at the historical data and we as agents, think about the pressure we have on us to get pricing right. If we price something wrong, we've hurt our seller that we owe fiduciary responsibility to, that delays the selling of their property. And then it puts an objective number attached to that property of my mistake that I just didn't have enough comps on. I just guessed the best that I had, right? And now I've hurt my seller. So this is the argument. The seller who got the same feedback through a coming soon phase and then launched at $550,000 from day one receives a much different reaction from the market. Right? The data supports this. Compass has found that listings using phase marketing ultimately achieve their higher sales prices. That's not because sellers are hiding information from buyers. It's because they're entering the market with better information themselves. For these reasons, the Compass-Redfin Alliance is fully aligned with clear collaboration. Compass will submit coming soon listings to any MLS that accepts them without forcing syndication. Okay, so in other words, they'll send it to the MLS as long as they don't force the syndication to go out everywhere. Sure, I'll throw it in the MLS if you don't force me to then syndicate to every single portal out there. Okay, the legacy institutions of real estate operated as on the assumption that they know better than consumers. NAR's clear cooperation policy, whatever its original intentions, tells homeowners they cannot publicly market their own property without immediate MLS submission and syndication to portals. Once a seller signs with an agent, any public marketing of that property, including a simple Instagram post, triggers the one business day MLS submission requirement. Who exactly does that policy protect? This is the question. If you have a policy like that, who does it actually protect? The argument they're making is it really about transparency, or is it about protecting MLS and Zillow's listing supply chain? You know, Zillow wants to sit back and say altruistically, oh, we need the data. It's so important for the consumer. Well, the argument could be flipped very quickly and very easily. Is Zillow, you're not as relevant if you don't have that data. You need listings to keep people coming to your website. You're pretending like it's about the seller, And there's an argument to be had that the data is a factor for the buyer, and there's another side of that equation. But as listing agents, our fiduciary responsibility is not to Zillow. It's not to MLS. It's also not to the buyers coming to the table. It's to the seller. It's to the seller. All right. What I've learned is that the agents and brokerages who thrive aren't the ones clinging to the old ways. They're the ones who recognize that our obligation is to our clients, not to institutional inertia. Right? Not to what we've always done. Oh, we've just always done it that way, so we continue to do it. Right? That's not a good way to live your life. Change is uncomfortable. Change threatens existing power structures. Change requires adaptation. But in a profession built around helping people make the biggest financial decisions of their lives, our discomfort cannot be the priority. The Compass-Redfin deal represents movement toward a more flexible, consumer-centric model where data serves sellers and buyers rather than institutions that have long claimed to speak for them. So that is this article. So that was an opinion piece. There's a lot of logic inside of this opinion piece. There's a lot of understanding about what's going on with this opinion piece. I understand there's an opposing view and what's going on there. I get it. But at the same time, we have to understand our position as agents is our fiduciaries to our seller. And we got to do what's the most important for them. And maybe it aligns with maybe you disagree with this opinion piece altogether and you have a whole different opinion. I welcome that. I like discussion. I like civil discourse. I like exposing and having a little bit of tension. Because if we have a little bit of tension, we're going to get down to some truth and be able to adapt and navigate this. I think it's good. I think this opinion piece makes a whole lot of sense to me. I think it makes sense. I do think if you're not part of the Compass brands and the Anywhere network, that as a brokerage, you need to be paying attention and positioning and making pivots and talking about this internally and getting ready. I think there is a shift kind of coming from this. I do. So to summarize this, I think Compass and Redfin have reached an agreement to share the coming soon and the off-market listings with each other. So we know that is true. We know that's happening. All right. So they've struck that. It's a 3-year deal that if Compass puts anything off market, then it can go into Redfin, 500,000 viewers every single month. That's a big pool of people that it gets exposed to that will not be on the MLS or be syndicated to Zillow or anywhere else. Okay. So that's happening. This move is challenging the traditional MLS only dominance. It creates a private network of data that's going to take place. There is a shift coming. The goal here is to provide clients with all the fiduciary responsibilities that they deserve. That's the argument to be had here. And this is highlighting a shift toward private networks within the brokerage world. So if you're part of a brokerage, another franchise even, you got to understand, you got to pay attention. Compass is now got the most agents in the entire world under one umbrella. We're talking Century 21, Coldwell Banker, ERA, Cochrane, Better Homes and Gardens. Those are all part of the Compass brand, not alone as what Compass just brought. So we're talking about a very large private network of listings that's happening here. So it is going to cause a disruption. It's going to cause a lot of discussion. Now, my action items for this is don't get so caught up in this. I mean, this is big play movement, you know, and we listen, we pay attention, but it's just not something we have fear about. Because one thing I know, been doing this for 20 years, is we adapt, we move on. We just adapt and we find the new norm and we just continue on. So it's all going to be okay. It's not like this is going to cause the MLS to crash and all that kind of stuff. It's just going to cause some changes to go on inside of our industry. All these corporations will pivot. It's power play. It's chess. We don't want to get caught in the mess of this. So we need to be able to understand this. We need to be able to explain this to other agents. We need to be able to explain this to our sellers. We got to explain this to our buyers about how to find off-market opportunities through personal, professional networking. So if you have an area in your area that maybe is doing more off-listing marketing, this is the time to network with other real estate agents. Go to those events, connect with those people relationally so you can find out what they have in the private off network situations, right? Those listings. It's very, very important. I would start calling top producing agents in your area and connect with them and ask them if they have any off-market listings that they can share and negotiate. I would also be highly engaged with your local MLS and rules and regulations. This is a national argument. You got to take it local and go into your local association and see what they allow, what they don't allow. Don't jeopardize that. This battle is not worth that. abide by the laws and the regulations and the associations that you are part of and the code of ethics and all those type of things are still very, very relevant and very important. And I would encourage you to understand them very well and stay there. Don't get caught up in this kind of stuff. We want to pay attention and navigate this, but we absolutely want to be compliant. I'm not against NAR. I think NAR has a lot of good stuff. And that's where we're heading. So, as a matter of fact, that kind of leads me straight into the very next article, because I want to talk about NAR, because NAR is reaffirming MLS discretion and post announcement. They're talking about that. And this is where, again, NAR is really restructuring in a lot of ways and being very careful how they navigate this. And they're really focused on trying to become the advocate for realtors. And I think they're really leaning heavily into that. And I'll applaud that. I think they're really working on this. And they're trying to be very careful and to navigate this change in this market and what that looks like and still be relevant. And it's difficult for them. Look, let's be honest. It's a difficult thing to do. I'm still a big fan of being a part of the National Association of Realtors. I am a realtor myself, have been for 20 years. I will continue to be so. I think they do a lot of good. If we get into RPAC and what they do on the government level, as far as this housing bill that was just passed, it's all very good, right? So I think there's some things that need to change. I think that's always the case. I don't think we ever just rest on our laurels. We got to be ready to make changes. But anyway, so given this, following the Compass-Redfin news, NAR stepped in to clarify. They stepped in to clarify that local MLSs still have the power to set their own rules. And this is kind of what I would call more of a stabilization in our understanding about what this means. This is really, as I read through this, is more about calming the fears of MLSs and independent brokers and that kind of stuff, because we can get caught up in that and be like, oh, the world's ending and all this kind of stuff. And that's not really the point. The point is to pay attention, be ready to adapt and change, but then, keep representing sellers and buyers extremely well and focus there, right? So let's get into this article here. I'm going to burn through this one. It's very short. NAR reaffirms MLS discretion following Compass-Redfin announcement. It says the association emphasizes that brokers and agents who choose to participate in an MLS agree to comply with the policies and rules. So just know everything we just talked about, you got to still abide by these policies and rules. I encourage you to do that. Like this is not bad, right? It says the National Association of Realtors reaffirmed that multiple listing services, MLSs, have discretion to set their own rules and policies regarding listing statuses following the late February announcement that Compass will market its coming soon status and private listings on Redfin. Okay, so each local MLS, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, is saying each local MLS sets those rules and regulations. So anything that Compass or any other brokerage out there does in response to wanting to go, private listings, if you are a realtor, you still have to abide by the private listings and what the NAR says you have to do, the rules and regulations, right? Now, they make a quote here. This is good. It says, NAR respects the rights of individual brokers to make their own business decisions and does not comment on specific brokerage practices or business models, a spokesperson said. NAR does not have a national policy regarding coming soon statuses. Listing statuses are matters of local discretion, with each MLS determining the appropriate statuses for its marketplace. Brokers and agents who choose to participate in an MLS agree to comply with that MLS's policies and rules, which are designed to benefit consumers and their marketplace. Now, that kind of seems like we're not going to weigh into this argument, but at the same time, it's the right response. They're right. If you are a broker and you choose to market your properties in MLSs and you choose to be a part of that local association, you abide by their rules. You have chosen to agree to that. You do what they say. And there's a benefit there. It's hard to say, let's just walk away from the MLS. No, that's not what we're saying. I wouldn't say that. I think there's a very big value to that MLS. The national syndication, I think in almost 90% of all the cases, maybe even more of a higher percentage, it's even the best option for your sellers. But there's a case to be had for the other 10%, right? But I still think it's very, very relevant. So let's put that in perspective. Compass International Holdings, we talked about that. It says, now the next quote here, NAR values the pro-competitive and pro-consumer benefits of MLS, including broad market exposure, access to available properties for sale in a marketplace, and equal access to the public. An NAR spokesperson said, we will continue to protect and advance the rights of Americans to own real estate and to support consumers throughout the home buying and selling process. It says NAR has evolved MLS rules in recent years following feedback from members and internal risk mitigation efforts. It introduced the multiple listing options for sellers, MLOS, last March to provide sellers working with listing brokers more options and choice in determining the best marketing strategy that meets their needs and interests. NAR also modernized its MLS handbook in November. So they've made some changes. They've addressed some issues that have popped up as far as the way this looks and how we can best represent. NAR's position is still going to be very much rooted in, what is best for the American people, and that is access to all properties. That is their argument. I would say there's a fair argument to be had there. I think there's a fair argument on what Compass was saying. Where this lands, I don't know. What I would say is abide by your MLS, follow the rules, right? So that's to be honest, this discussion between these two articles gives us a pretty good, solid foundation to kind of understand what's really going on here and what's at play. Now, if you're a brand new real estate agent, you're probably sitting back going, like, what the heck is going on here? Like, this is, like, there's a mess going on. I'm getting ready to get my license and go into this. I was like, yeah, but here's the thing. It's a fascinating time to be in real estate. So, like, I mean, this is why I love this industry. It's always changing. Like, I mean, can you imagine just being a guy that goes to work or gal goes to work every single day and you just do the exact same thing every single day? That is not the case with real estate. It's always ebbing and flowing. You got to navigate it. It's just a contagious thing. I love it. I love reading this kind of stuff. I don't get worried about it. I don't have fear about it. I've been doing this too long. I've been doing this way too long. I've been two like major shifts in the market, maybe even 3 if you want to make the argument. But like, we've come out just fine. There's struggle, there's lean times, there's difficulties, but man, it's such a great industry. Gosh, it's such a good industry. All right, anyway, I gotta wrap this up. I'm running way too long. I don't think I'm gonna have time to get into the next 2 articles, actually. I'm just gonna have to hold back. I will do that tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. So that'll be Wednesday, March 11th. So come back and you guys can participate in that. So just so you know, I will be talking about the next 2 articles. I'll add those to my list for tomorrow. It'd be 2 signals push mortgage rates higher. So I'm going to be talking about why the mortgage interest rate has gone higher and what that looks like, and why these 2 things have factored in to cause interest rates to kind of spike just a little bit, but not go too crazy. And then I'm going to have a conversation in regards to should buyers tap retirement savings. And we're not talking about the retired age, where someone's in the retirement age and they're tapping into their savings. I'm talking about somebody that's already got like a 401k and tapping into that. And this would be like more for the Gen X, millennial type generation. If you are putting in your 401k, should you tap your retirement savings to pay for a down payment to be able to buy a house when you factor in equity and all that kind of stuff and affordability? That's the argument. So come back tomorrow. We'll talk about that. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a good day. Thank you guys for tuning in today for this live stream. I always greatly appreciate you guys taking the time to do so. I don't take that for granted. You take time out of your day and your schedule to come and listen to me talk. So for that, I am extremely grateful. So thank you. I appreciate you guys. If you found some kind of value inside this article or inside of this video, please consider sharing this out to your friends, other real estate agents, that kind of stuff. Would love to grow a really strong community of real estate agents here that are just focused on building their business, kind of cutting through the noise, growing together, having some dialogue. Leave me some comments. Let's talk. Let's have some dialogue. If you guys got questions or concerns or just general comments or whatever, feel free to leave those in the comments or DM me. I like interaction. I like talking. It's what I do. I mean, you can tell that I'm a talker. So I would appreciate that. I want to build that kind of community. That's what I'm striving to do. So I do thank you guys as always. That is your real estate brief for today. If you found this helpful, please consider hitting the like button to tell YouTube you would like more of this type of content. Consider subscribing to join a community of real estate agents that are focused on building a business that is relationship focused first. There's always more. I'm going to do that tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, where you're watching me now. I will see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good day.